At dawn on June 18th, 1815, Europe held its breath over a quiet Belgian field. Beneath the silence, thousands of soldiers prepared for a battle that would reshape the continent. Napoleon Bonaparte had returned from exile, determined to reclaim his empire. Months earlier, he had escaped from exile on the island of Elba. As he marched toward Paris, soldiers sent to arrest him joined his cause instead. Across Europe, monarchs meeting in Vienna saw his return as a threat to fragile peace. They formed a coalition, determined to end his rule once and for all. Napoleon moved quickly into Belgium, seeking to strike before his enemies could unite. His plan was simple: divide his enemies and defeat them separately. The Prussians, led by Blücher, refused to break under pressure. Wellington carefully chose his ground near the village of Waterloo. His troops concealed themselves behind a gentle ridge, shielded from French artillery. Heavy rain the night before turned the battlefield into thick mud. The soaked ground would slow movement and weaken artillery fire. As the fog lifted, two vast armies faced one another. The battle began with an assault on the farmhouse of Hougoumont. What was meant as a diversion quickly became a brutal struggle. The fight consumed thousands of men on both sides. French guns thundered across the valley, but Wellington's hidden lines rose to deliver disciplined volleys. French infantry advanced in dense formations toward the ridge. Infantry squares formed, walls of steel against cavalry. Marshal Ney launched massive cavalry charges, yet the squares held firm under relentless assault. Without support, the cavalry attacks failed. Napoleon watched carefully, searching for a decisive moment. Then, on the eastern horizon, a new threat appeared. The Prussians were arriving, determined to rejoin the fight. Fighting erupted in the village of Plancenoit. Napoleon was forced to divide his precious reserves. Wellington's line, though battered, remained intact. Casualties mounted on both sides. As daylight faded, Napoleon committed his final reserve. The Imperial Guard. The Guard marched forward, symbols of French invincibility. Allied soldiers rose and unleashed devastating fire. For the first time, the Guard faltered. The psychological blow rippled across the battlefield. What began as withdrawal became chaotic retreat. Prussian forces pressed forward relentlessly. Equipment and guns were left behind in the confusion. Inside his command tent, Napoleon weighed options as the battle slipped beyond his control. The lines on the map no longer favored him. Space and time were closing in. Across the ridge, Allied artillery continued its relentless rhythm. For many, the grandeur of empire dissolved into raw survival. The Prussians advanced through forests and fields with unbroken resolve. By late afternoon, the French army was being compressed from two sides. Exhaustion replaced confidence among the ranks. Wellington's control never faltered, even in the heaviest fighting. The war did not spare the villages caught in its path. Attempts to reorganize were swallowed by confusion. Even the elite guard felt the weight of the moment. When the guard recoiled, disbelief turned to fragile hope. Symbols of pride collapsed into the mud. Darkness fell upon a field strewn with the cost of ambition. Surgeons worked through the night. With limited tools and endless suffering, Napoleon withdrew, knowing the campaign was lost. The retreat stretched for miles into the night. Artillery once feared across Europe stood silent and deserted. By morning, the coalition held the field. The rising sun revealed the true scale of destruction. News of defeat traveled swiftly to Paris. His political authority evaporated almost overnight. Within days, he abdicated for the second time. Exile awaited him far across the Atlantic. On a remote island, his era would quietly end. In Vienna, diplomats strengthened the balance of power. Ink replaced gunpowder in shaping Europe's future. Borders were drawn to prevent domination by any single power. Former rivals stood united by shared sacrifice. Across the continent, civilians began rebuilding shattered lives. Fields once torn by battle returned to harvest. Yet grief lingered long after the cannons fell silent. Survivors carried the war within them. Commerce slowly revived across Europe's ports. New era of industry began to rise. Even victors understood the cost of triumph. For the Prussians, resilience had defined victory. The battlefield itself became a place of memory. A monument rose to mark the turning point of an age. Time softened the scars of war. Generations would study the battle for lessons in strategy. Soldiers recorded their memories in fading ink. Artists transformed the chaos into enduring images. Newspapers spread the story across continents. Diplomacy replaced conquest as the continent's guiding principle. Progress advanced where armies once marched far away. Fallen emperor reflected in isolation. The symbols of empire were reduced to relics. History moved forward, indifferent to individual ambition. Peace, though fragile, endured for decades. The memory of sacrifice remained sacred. Thousands were remembered in carved stone. A continent once engulfed in fire chose stability over glory. Geography remained, but power had shifted. The field that decided an empire returned to silence. Nature reclaimed what war had scarred. From ruin, life quietly emerged. The balance of power reshaped Europe's destiny. Waterloo became a symbol far greater than a single battle. It marked not only the fall of a man, but the end of an era, and the beginning